I think I have been waiting for really long to be on this show with both you and Kunal, two of you legends, and to talk to our viewers about Formula One. There's been so much happening, and so much has happened since I was last here. And yeah, it feels great to be back. So thank you so much.
Likewise, it's such a special feeling. Long overdue, this particular episode.
Thank
It's going to be a really special one. And your thoughts, Kunal, before we get down to the Formula One, now, how are you feeling? Because for me, this has to be the most special episode of the Inside Line F1 podcast live that I've ever had.
Likewise, that's why I termed it as the blockbuster episode, even before it was published, even before it went live, even before we knew what all the, listeners and viewers out there are going to be, telling us about this show. Because for me, it's a pleasure to have you, Soumil, the future of sports broadcasting, as I know, and Mithila, who, of course, has been my favorite partner in crime for all these years. And,
thank you.
she brings a fantastic angle to how she watches Formula One. So she's a fan with very different with a very different lens on the sport. So I'm really excited to bring that lens back to our channels.
No pressure.
Should be a lot of fun. No, should be a lot of fun. And let's get straight into it on this episode of the Inside Line F1 Podcast Live. Our topic is going to be the future of drivers in Formula One. Lots of intriguing stuff to discuss about the competition of Formula One later on. What about the way drivers portray themselves on social media and all the other topics? Let's begin with competition, because Formula One recently, Mithila, is making lots of big changes, and the emphasis suddenly seems to be on the driver a little bit more.
Yeah, and Somil, it's so exciting. When we were brainstorming about what we should talk about, and for this particular blockbuster episode, and it just seemed so natural that yes, we need to be talking about the future of drivers, because the way the sport is emerging, we've come a long way. From the time when in the 2000s you had like Ferrari as this. Monolith structure larger than life, and the moment you had a driver who threatened the presence of Ferrari brand, he had to make way. So the fact is that the driver landscape today is very different. Big teams, you have these mega constructors, of course, but you also have these mega drivers who are personalities and brands in their own right. And as the sport evolves, as you have new regulations, you have all the changes actually that Liberty Media is making, it only seems like the emphasis on the driver or the drivers is going to increase, and that's where the spotlight really is.
That's true. And I think a lot of it has come towards the opportunity of building your brand directly, right? And not having to rely on journalists or news media per se, but just going out there and expressing your own story.
Absolutely. And I think that the whole that digital media has given Formula One and drivers for that matter such a massive opportunity to put themselves out there, outside what was the narrow box of the previous years, where you could only say what the team approved in a Friday or Thursday press conference, and nothing beyond that. Social media gives the drivers a chance to say what's on their mind, and to let different aspects personality shine through. And of course, you have platforms like Netflix, which also bring out the whole human aspect of drivers. So they're not just the in racing machines anymore. They're also like little vulnerable, little funny, a little quirky, all of that rolled together. So they're just so much more likable as personalities, thanks to social media, thanks to the access we have. Lots of thoughts going on there. Yeah.
At least some of them are, not all of them. Still, you get the
Not all of
idea.
them. There are exceptions, of course.
It's crazy, isn't it, Kunal, how everything has changed. And this sort of aspect now that drivers are a lot more open, it does allow the sport to grow, right? Because now you see personalities come through more than ever than before.
It is, Soumil, and up until now we've had 10 or maybe 12 brands, the teams in Formula One, but now that's literally amplified by the number of drivers also being present there. And that is, like Mithila said, it's a changing landscape of how F1 teams also needs to evolve. And you started the first point by talking about competition, and that's another thought that I had in mind that Formula One is only going to experiment that much more with competitive racing formats, whether it's a sprint qualifying or the reverse grid and the likes, right? And of course, all the drivers, especially the young ones that have come up through the ranks, have raced in other categories in these different competitive formats, right? But with these formats coming in, the emphasis goes back onto the driver to sort of, reconfigure his or her approach when it comes to a racing weekend. The survival of the fittest, literally speaking, that's how it's going to be. Because let's put it this way, we've got sprint qualifying for three rounds this season, right? How quickly a driver is able to adapt to such changing formats, and I'm just using sprint qualifying as an example, will make or break their careers going forward as well, because agility is only going to be that much more crucial when it comes to being a future Formula One driver. And I say this also because of, the driver lifespan is not, in my mind, going to be as much. Like, we are celebrating Kimi Raikkonen for being around for 40 years or whatever. I know he's not been around 40 years, but he's been there forever, right? But I don't know if a Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz Jr., and several other drivers will a race as long. Could be personal choices or could just be choices of younger other drivers being available. So in the competitive sense of things as well, agility will be very, very crucial when you are targeting to become a Formula One driver in the future.
But why not? Well, why do you think that they won't race for that much longer, Kunal, in your opinion? Is that perhaps a thing of teams getting tired, or perhaps you see more younger drivers coming in because of how accessible the sport has become? Well, what do you reckon
I,
is the reason behind
I,
that?
I, I think it's a mix of the two. First is, of course, sport is that much more accessible, right? Liberty Media has made F3, F2, and F1 a very public platform for drivers progressing up through the ranks, right? And one of the reasons what also this brings to Formula One is the quick succession with which drivers are knocking on the doors of Formula One. Callum Ilott, Nick De Vries, Pascal Wehrlein, just a couple of those or three names that I took without digging in deeper. All of them equally worthy of a seat because of junior formula success, but not having anywhere to go. So, if you take the Red Bull approach, where if a driver's not performing, get someone else, because there's almost somebody in the pipeline in the Red Bull case of things, at least. So it's going to be that drivers will become a far more available commodity, if I may term this as a commodity, in the future. And I'll again, it's going a little too wild in my head while I say this, but Liberty Media will try and get more drivers up through the ranks as well, in my view, because different nationalities, different personalities, different brands coming in sort of open up the spectrum a little more. And I also feel that in the time to come they will try and bring down the importance of the driver. It's anyway lower, right? Which is why the whole budget cap discussion is coming in, saying, why do you need a Lewis with 50 odd $1 million when you can get somebody else at 10 or 12 or 15? So those discussions. And again, like I said, what's the wild thought in my head? Will we have an NBA style driver draft in the next 10, 15, 20 years to come? So lots of things. Again, I know people listening in will be like, this guy's high on a Saturday afternoon or evening. But the truth is, this is where I sense that things could go in the time to come, where you will get drivers really eager to just race in Formula One without commanding the big bucks. So you sort of keep them as a moving commodity.
And just that impatience of trying out new drivers might be built up by the fact that the new formats, at least sprint qualifying and now closer racing, hopefully for 2022, this may expose drivers a little bit more in terms of pure talent. Maybe that's why we could see that's where we could see the talent differential, perhaps. We get younger talent to try and see, okay, right, are they better than what we already have before? Something like that, perhaps.
I just want to first say that Kunal says that it's a wild prediction, but Kunal is known for making wild predictions that actually come true. He has this very scarily accurate track record. And I won't be surprised if, some seasons from now we're sitting here and then he pulls out this footage and he's like, I told you so, guys. So, yeah, viewers, please watch out for that. Kunal and his crystal ball. Uh, crystal
Thank you.
But interesting point, what you all are talking about. The whole idea of driver performance, and how it's almost kind of representative of how we no longer, as a, I would say, generation, have the attention span very long rope, and that's literally what seems to be happening in Formula One. And I would blame or credit, looking at it oppositely, Red Bull Racing with this whole philosophy. It's almost become so corporatized, where it feels like it's a corporate job where you move up or you move out, but you don't stay in the same place. If you're not good enough, then you seek greener pastures, literally, hint hint, Formula E. Anyway, so what I'm trying to say is that I think as time kind of progresses, we're seeing the prevalence of contracts that are only for 1 year. That's become almost like so common in Formula One, that drivers are getting only 1 year. It kind of lines up with what Kunal is saying, right? Although you don't have an NBA style draft yet, drivers are being put to the test every single season. They can't quite rest on their past performance. They need to prove themselves every single season, or every single half season if you're at Red Bull Racing, actually.
Poof, that's true as well. But then why do we see Kimi here for so long? Is that just a sort of more of an emotional decision? Because I was somewhat surprised that they didn't choose to go for Callum Island or something like that. Because
Guys, I
Raikkonen has
have to
been
be
long. Of course,
honest
he's
here. I have to be honest here. This is Kimmy, and I'm going to just, it is my good wishes and my love and my thoughts that have been keeping him in Formula One all this time. I would like to take a fair share of credit, but yeah, respectfully, I think it all boils down to the fact that there is quite no one like Kimmy.
true.
To walk out of the sport as a world champion, to come back, all these the twists and turns that he's made with his career, in a sport that's so dependent on public PR, and now social media, and he's like a legend in his own right. um I don't quite see drivers like it emerging in the future. I mean, there are a few who would love to claim that spot, but increasingly difficult, I would say. But yeah, he is like a legend that has spanned so many generations, and I think that's part of his charm. Kunal, Soumil, what do you all think?
Why don't
Samuel,
you
why
go
don't
first,
we hear
Kunal?
your views first?
Okay, no worries.
Pehle aap.
Fairly up, exactly. No, I think you're quite right with that. There's literally nobody like Kimi, right? And you've seen him over the years, nonchalant personality. I don't think we'll ever get someone very similar. But the emphasis is on having a draw, and Kimi Raikkonen clearly is a draw like that. And to my mind, I think Formula One has done a good job of creating more draws that many other sports haven't quite been able to do as well. So it's good for Formula One that although we have elder draws like a Sebastian Vettel, like a Fernando Alonso, or a Kimi Raikkonen, and even Lewis Hamilton, by the way. Why am I not counting him in this list? But it's also good to see younger draws being coming up, like Charles Leclerc. People well tuned in to watch him race, right? You just saw how distraught everyone was to see him crashing out and then not being able to participate in the Monaco Grand Prix. So that emotional connection has been created already. That's how you sustain the sport in the long run, by building new stars. And luckily, Formula One has been able to do that.
Oh, absolutely, Samuel. And our producer Aditya has just put a question on the studio chat saying, "When will Kimi smile?" I think he only smiles on social media. He knows that people absolutely love the personality he portrays or the personality he actually is. And I know when Mithila and I, report from the races, she very nicely just blocks off all slots on our joint calendar. And then I know those are the sessions when Kimmy's going to speak, because hey, who wouldn't mind
Exactly.
sitting and listening to Kimi Raikkonen, and his sessions are absolutely blockbuster. Okay, but I have a different view, or rather two views out here. Firstly, guys, just enjoy Kimi Raikkonen for who he is and what he is, because when he goes, okay, we are not going to find another personality as endearing, as funny, as cutthroat, as honest as he
Yep.
is. Okay, so just enjoy it. It's a once in a lifetime, not generational thing, which you could say for the likes of Schumacher and Hamilton and Verstappen and the likes. Kimi Raikkonen is once in a lifetime, so just enjoy it for what it is, right? But the second thing, and this is more for Soumil and Mithila to to give a thought about as well, is
Uh-huh.
every driver now, okay, is is a good guy. Is like the guy next door who's a great racer. Every driver is honest on social media. You find very few blips in or spikes in the personality line that drivers portray. And I'll name a few: Daniel Ricciardo, Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz, Lando Norris, George Russell. There's a common thread that sort of binds these drivers along the way. But my question is, are we seeing a flat line when it comes to driver personalities? Are we going to miss the kind of spikes the likes of Kimi Raikkonen and now Fernando Alonso and maybe even Nikita Mazepin, keep portraying time and again? Because if it's going to be a flat line, literally every driver is going to be likable in Formula One, and that's sort of like there has to be a balance in the equation, and that's a very imbalanced equation in my point. It can't become like, hey, everyone's a good person in Formula One. Just putting a thought out there.
No, no, 100%. I totally agree with you. I think it's probably down to PR-based answers, right? I hate it when drivers are speaking in interviews. I'm interested in interviewing drivers because they all end up saying the same thing. Oh, we had a good weekend. Oh, we'll improve the next time. I know it's the diplomatic thing. They have a personality inside, but they're always forced to lie for things that are good to listen to instead of what they really want to say. And that sort of takes away the charm a little bit. This new gen slightly different on social media. That is, in the PR interviews, they're still more or less the same. But it draws a lot away from it. It adds more than being a good guy. That's what my perception. Thoughts on this, Mithila?
I think the other part of this is that you have a driver like Lewis Hamilton who occasionally really puts, whether it's with regards to his views on different social issues or, doing that sometimes are kind of unbecoming of a multiple world champion and all of that. Like I'm remembering the video where he was with Nick. They were doing. You guys get the drift. But the fact is that when you have a driver like that, and when he puts himself out there, met with a lot of criticism and a lot of negativity. So I think you need to be at a place in your career where you're okay putting yourself out there. Lewis Hamilton, because of where he's reached, he can take that risk. He can take that risk that like Mercedes will be okay to have him on their rolls, despite his political and social and views and all of that. I would say that when you're an upstart or just in a place like Charles the Clerk, where you have potential, but you still right on board to bank on you in that way, or Dan Rick for that matter, I don't think they can quite take those chances yet. A foot way out of line, where you'll have a top boss saying that, oh yeah, he's a great driver, he's great on track, but is he going to be a liability for me? Is he going to be tweeting strange things that don't align with my brand? Am I going to get calls from my sponsor because he went and did something completely out of whack? And I think being safe or being likable is it's just a step along that way. And hopefully, as drivers reach a place where, say, for Fernando Alonso is reached, or even for that matter, Vettel, where he can take a stance and not quite subscribe to the social media model. It's because of where he is in his career. But yeah, Somil, we would love to hear what.
I think you've mentioned a very interesting point about earning that freedom of saying things. But what do you guys think about Mercedes going all in for Lewis Hamilton? So nobody till now knew, I mean, for that matter, what Mercedes' social inclinations are in any which ways whatsoever. But changing their livery to support Lewis's push for the BLM movement, a really touching gesture, that one. But it's interesting to see a whole brand build up their image based on their star driver. What are your takes on this one? But both of you, of course, being expert marketers. Why don't you
Okay,
go first,
ladies
Kunal?
first, Mithila.
Okay,
Either way.
I was going to say Kunal, you look like you have an interesting thought in your head. Just go.
Exactly that.
You were waiting to speak. Come on, Kunal.
Yeah, I mean, I love the way Mercedes has embraced Lewis Hamilton, and I think it's a part of their more global brand approach because there is still an interesting challenge that a local beer that we all know globally, Kingfisher, faced. It was about saying. It's the beer my father drinks. Why should I have the same brand? Right. In the case of Mercedes, it was sort of falling within the same structure. It's the car my father drives. So I need a more cooler car to drive. And I think Lewis, with his personality on track, in the car, on social media, in the press conferences, sort of gives Mercedes that younger, cooler, more edgy vibe, which the global brand desperately wants to build itself on, and I think it's working really well. And I know in Monaco there was this one big statement that Lewis made which sort of fell foul of a lot of fans. When somebody asked him in the media, are there any learnings for the team, are there any learnings for you, he said no, and that sort of blew out of proportion when they said he's not being a team player and the likes. But that's what makes Lewis Hamilton so special. He's calling a spade a spade. It's about what you pointed out, Soumil, that drivers are becoming PR robots, and thankfully somebody is able to step out of that mold and say what's on their mind, which I think is very, very crucial. And for me, I would love for drivers to be like boxers. I'm going to beat the pulp out of you when I see you on track, literally. Okay. Instead of being like, yeah, they got a great car, I don't think if we can beat him, and, try and put the favorites tag to the other team and drivers. So that's one personality switch. I hope future drivers, and I'm sure a lot of y'all listening in will aspire and probably become future drivers, will remember that, okay, let me try and be like that boxer who'll say, I'm going to go beat my title rival.
Interesting.
A really interesting way of putting it, Kunal. That actually got me thinking, and I think it's. Okay, wait, let me frame this correctly. I think a good way to look at it is that the synergy that always existed on track, where the team and the driver were kind of unit supporting each other, working through. It's kind of now extending off track, where as a driver, yes, you have certain views. You are a person, a personality, expect you to fall into a basic cookie cutter model just because we as a team hire you. We only hiring you as a driver, but we are having you on board in your totality. And there's that synergy that also now which is really really exciting. And you see the opposite aspect of that, where you have a driver like Maz, liability he is, because of his off track antics in a way. And then you see that what Lewis Hamilton is doing is, it's almost like bringing the team a very high moral ground without actually doing much themselves, which is very interesting, right? When you're in a sport like Formula One, and it's a very interesting place that you can occupy as a brand.
Yeah, exactly. It's so much to wonder upon the image. So interesting to see what it's like. But we shall discuss another interesting topic, which is salaries and the future one. Budget cap is already here, folks. And both of you mentioned the point early on about you pay $50 million for example, you can get something for 10, 11. Now they're going to cap it off. And what are your frankly, it's okay. I mean, it sort of takes away of it. Say, if you're a boxer, like if you're say someone like Floyd Mayweather Jr., you see him make billions, wanting to be like him, which is just one of the side aspects. But again, when you consider the job for a racing driver, I don't think it's the money that attracts you in the very first place. It's the glory and the success. So in that sense, it shouldn't be a major problem, no?
It's a good
Okay,
point,
I'll just take this
actually.
one first.
Yeah, go for it, Kunal.
I think I'm not for driver salary caps. I think they're gladiators, literally speaking. I think they literally earn their bucks, when they're in wheel to wheel battles, when they need to, put in a fast lap, and they manage to do so. And even more so given just how risky these cars still are. And we've discussed and over discussed Romain Grosjean's crash from the Bahrain Grand Prix last year. So for me, from a driver's point of view, and maybe I always think from a driver's point of view, okay, I think that a budget cap doesn't necessarily make sense. Of course, it's nobody knows if the cap is going to be 10% of what they're currently paid, or 20% or 50%. But so while I think it's not fair, I think that the future will be a budget cap for the drivers, because if the team restricted from spending more than $145 million this year, to give an example, they are spending 30% of that budget on one employee, which is Lewis Hamilton. So when you put the perspective from a team point of view, from an economic point of view, okay, then I suspect that they will bring in a driver budget sooner or later. And I think that maybe that will be when the major generational change of drivers happens. Because if you give a Lewis Hamilton or a Max Verstappen a pay cut, they're not going to be wanting to race in that. But what if you offer a similar salary within the pay cut to an Oscar Piastri, for example, who's just about trying to make himself into Formula One, and that's just one name that comes to my mind. But the future drivers will probably just grow within knowing that there's a budget cap that they will sort of be played under, just like drivers are growing with the fact that DRS will always be available at their aid when it comes to overtaking.
True. True. What do you think about this, Mithila? Is this something that appeals to you?
Yeah, so I think when you look at it from the point of view of what's good for the sport, of course, this is something that is inevitable if you need to keep the competitive field as even as possible, and just the general direction in which the sport is going. This is something we can all see in the horizon. But the fact is, again, when you think of as being a very team centric sport versus a driver centric sport. So if you think of it as, okay, any driver when put in a Mercedes can go out there and win races, if that is the way you believe the dynamics of the sport go, then of course you're going to believe that, oh, way too much to have Lewis Hamilton out there rather than George Russell, for example. So if you start believing that drivers are easily replaceable, and like Kunal said, commodities where one can easily replace the other, then of course you're going to be thinking in line with a budget cap. But what value do you put on the other aspects of what the driver brings to the table? We were talking about Lewis Hamilton and how he's doing so. Mercedes the brand, and not just Mercedes, the racing team on track. What intangible value do you put on that? You kind of start thinking of that as Mercedes, as Formula One. You start realizing that drivers are not always exactly substitutable, and sure, a budget cap is what the sport probably needs, but you're going to lose a little bit of the individual flavor that we have going for us at the moment.
And driver salaries, right? How do you define what's good and what's not? Because you really can't put a finger on it. Say Lewis Hamilton, right? It's on those particular moments, like a Bahrain 2021, where you can put a finger and say, right, this is what the man is worth, or say in Imola that nobody else can do something quite like this one.
Yeah.
And so in that aspect, you really can't look at it and say, right, okay, we should cap it off, right? Because then it sort of feels a bit weird that say a Lewis Hamilton could potentially be paid as the same as, who knows, some younger driver coming up but with bigger hype potentially.
Kunal
Sounds a bit
always
funny
has
to think
this
of it.
point of view. And Kunal, sorry, I'm stealing your thought. But he always says that when Bolt runs a race, you're not just paying him for those 9 seconds of sprinting, for years of work, of raw talent,
True.
of passion, of countless inputs that have gone into him. And when you think for Formula One driver, you can't help but think that how do you put a number on something that is so intangible? Number on drivers who started racing at the age of 3, of all the
Exactly.
years and hours of sacrifice, of input, putting their life online. um, and then when you think of a budget cap, it becomes a very strange argument. there is no right or wrong here, but it's just that it's so difficult to put a number on something like this. There's no price tag that you can need.
Which is why I think that's why we've seen salaries being inflated so much these days. That's why we see Hamilton right up there in the list of the highest paid sports players now.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I personally think, for example, 2021 is when Lewis is proving why he commands the big bucks as he does, given how close the competition is. Okay. It's just about at the talent that drivers bring. And, we don't know what George Russell could have done in this year's Mercedes against the Max Verstappen. But,
True.
the cost of finding out for Mercedes is extremely high, which is why they believe that paying the mega millions to Lewis Hamilton sort of makes sense. And, talking about driver salaries, I have a feeling it's going to go down the draft way, which is probably okay. I would say, there will be a larger pool of drivers to choose from apart from what we've had. But of course, a lot needs to change within Formula One traditional structures, the driver academies that we've had, and so on, which are literally funding drivers through the ranks. So I think
True.
I think very interesting times ahead for Formula One, especially when it comes to drivers. And going back to what Mithila said, if Mercedes thinks that if you put anyone in a Mercedes and he or she will end up winning the race, then of course the team will want to invest the maximum when it comes to building their race car. But what we spoke about earlier about having new competitive championship formats, about being more agile, about making sure that you're able to drive the car that's given to you rather than wait for a car that suits you. Those typical Formula One questions that come when it comes to evaluating drivers. I think that's where the difference a particular driver would make, and that's where the sort of the amount of money they can charge is a lot higher than a baseline driver. So it's like we say, it's 80% car and 20% driver right now, hypothetically, right? But the minute
Mhm.
that percentage shifts back in favor of the driver, I think the pricing of drivers is only going to remain more premium. And that's just how it should be, because you may build the best car, but if you don't have a driver that's capable of extracting the best from your best car, what's the point? So if Mercedes are spending 50 million for Lewis Hamilton so that he extracts the best from a $150 million car, somewhat makes sense to me.
And I'll start with you on this one, Midlab. What do you reckon? Do you think we're going to see more emphasis on the driver starting 2022 with the cars hopefully being slightly closer and helping out with seeing better overtaking?
I think Kunal really hit the nail on the head here. So Kunal, well done. That was so eloquently said.
You guys
And
bring
yeah,
out the best in me. Thank you.
you're welcome. So I think the fact is to with the field kind of tightening up, and that's what the whole effort is, right? From Liberty Media closer together to kind of shake things up a little bit more often and all of that. Yes, I think the emphasis is going to shift to, um, and it's almost going to be like there are going to be more half chances for more of the field. Not going to be a runaway case where Lewis Hamilton is on pole and then he has like a lights to flag kind of. I hope going to happen anymore, and then it's up to this, that can the driver grab any get. And one driver that I know has been really good at doing that is Sergio Perez. Every time he has had a half chance, he's onto the podium. And that's what happens, right? When the field is more mixed up, um, actually convert when it matters and make it stick. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot of that in 2022, to separate like the that have it from those that probably may not be around for as many seasons.
That's literally perfect the way you put it that way, and that's so true, right? You that differentiation is going to be more evident than ever, hopefully, which is what we all tune in for.
Best in me.
I should have copyrighted that before
I
you
couldn't
took it, and I
resist.
hope
I couldn't
Soumil
resist.
doesn't say that.
And your take, Kunal? Your thoughts on this?
You know, I'm just eager to see how Formula One ends up treating drivers in the time to come, because they're going to be excellent brands. We all love it when a driver is on the limit in the cars, and I hope that there are no limits when it comes to them extracting the best out of their personalities and their brand values. I think that's what we'll all love, right? On the car, on the track, in the car, be as close to the limit as you can be. But when you're off it, just be yourself, and just have a limitless boundary for extracting the best of your personality. That's what we'll all love, and I think this is where Kimi Raikkonen is the best example. Be like him, guys.
Be like him. But actually, just a small spin-off or a thought before we move on to all lovely questions, by the way, all of them. People are trying to be like Kimi Raikkonen, and it seems a bit. The internet term for this would be a little bit cringeworthy because it seems like a copy. Doesn't seem authentic. Doesn't feel original. It just feels like they're trying to be Kimi. Have you seen that sort of stuff, guys? Have you seen that happening, Kunal? What are your takes? What are your thoughts on this?
I have seen nobody, even get as close to Kimi Raikkonen, and this is where Kimi could sing Eminem's sign. There's a million of them trying to be like me. They'll be the next best thing, but not quite me.
You should have sung that.
You should have
I
sound like
almost did.
exactly what I was thinking.
Wrapped it out.
This is where people would have tuned out. Say Kunal is definitely, onto something we shouldn't be. So.
Give yourself some credit. But
So,
also,
so I know
think
what to add out in my next intro. So I can say a potential rapper as well. So who knows?
you got it.
You
So,
saying, Mithila?
talk about, yeah, I was thinking that, when
Mm-hmm.
you look at Drive to Survive and you think
Yeah.
about how start seeing that a lot of these personalities that we see from F1 drivers, of course, a lot of it is who they are authentically, but a lot of it is really scripted, media presented,
Hmm.
overhyped drama, right?
Yep.
And but when you look at some, it is the same personality in every single medium, and I think viewers can get that. F1 fans understand that, and I think we'll be seeing a lot more of this as Drive to Survive only becomes more integral to Formula One telling.
Mm-hmm.
You see that there are like these heroes and these villains and all of that, but the truth is that who are you, when show is off, and how
True.
does it connect with who you are on track and all of that. And I think that's why it's so difficult for someone Kimi Raikkonen did, because he began before all this whole social media digital circus. That's why he was really able to cut through all of it and do it the way he wanted to.
Controlling his own narrative, isn't it?
Exactly.
Now then, let's move on to some of our fun fan questions. There's one from Anubhav Das. Let's start with that one. He says, "What are the chances of Danny Kvyat having a drive for 2021 if Yuki Tsunoda fails to match his goals because AlphaTauri need consistent drivers to be fifth in the constructors?" Good point. Good point. That is. Your thoughts, Kunal?
I don't think they're going to go back to Danny Kvyat. I think
Hmm.
they will probably give a Liam Lawson, Jehan Daruvala, or
Yes.
Yuri Vips, or one of them a chance, because there's probably there's better hope in giving somebody new a chance and seeing how they settle in than bringing a Danny Kvyat, because for AlphaTauri, I don't necessarily think finishing in the constructors championship fifth or seventh really makes a difference. Of course, it makes a difference in terms of money, but they're not there to sort of be there in that fight. They're there to find the next Max Verstappen for Red Bull Racing.
And imagine,
Right.
Mithila, how discouraging it may be for the younger Red Bull talent just to have a Danny Kvyat coming back. So they might be wondering all this for what? If you
I
just had to
agree.
take
Sorry, Soumil, you were saying.
no worries, no worries.
Yeah,
I was
I think
just
there's
coming to
just
the
too
same point.
much.
Like, why?
too much water under the bridge there with Danny Kvyat. And
Hmm.
if you look at the entire the way Red Bull Racing is, the whole ladder, the ladder is structured,
Yeah.
where there's, like I was saying, so much emphasis on perform or get out. The fact that you're giving drivers a second or multiple chances, or you're just recycling the same drivers, it totally takes the bite out of that threat in a way, and they're literally counting on that threat to make drivers perform, right? That is the stick they're
Hmm.
using to get drivers to perform in as little time as possible. And I think it just completely goes against the philosophy at Red Bull Racing. I
Hmm.
mean, the whole
Exactly.
ladder of it. Yeah.
Exactly. Just be like sort of Ganguly. Identify your players, give them time to be better, and you'll see the magic happen eventually. Maybe not immediately, but they'll win you the World Cup in 8 years. I think that's the approach that they should be taking. Moving
Eventually.
on, hopefully that can happen. But Red Bull have always relied on those mercurial talents all the while. They've not built up a strong and consistent one for many years. It's just a bit
That's an
baffling.
interesting point, Soumil.
Last strong and consistent driver was Mark Webber, who was not even a Red Bull driver. It's a bit crazy how that one has been working on. But let's speak about the next question. This is also from Anubhav. He asks, "What if Mercedes still keep Russell in Williams, and is not promoted to Mercedes? What if Red Bull sign him from Mercedes because they have been hiring Mercedes personnel and drop Checo?" See, this is an interesting point. Now, Red Bull have actually been hiring a lot of Mercedes personnel. This is on the engine department because of the new Red Bull technology group or something. I don't know the exact wording for what they've titled it, but yes, it's their engine department. So they've been hiring lots of personnel from Brixworth. But what do you reckon, Mithila? Do you think they'll get more people, especially on the driving side, and for Russell as well? I think the crux of this question is, what if he's not promoted next year?
I think it becomes very difficult because Mercedes also need to think of their succession plan. Like after Lewis Hamilton, who do they even have? And I don't think they would ever let the kind of
Hmm.
strategic approach that we see Mercedes has always employed on and off track. I think it would be like a crazy situation to see George Russell drop off and go anywhere, Red Bull Racing for that matter. And I'm also
Hmm.
imagining that a Verstappen Russell pairing would be quite strange, because I'm imagining how I don't think Russell being a number two driver, given all the the dues he's paid by putting in so many years at Williams. Number two to Max Verstappen
Exactly.
sounds quite outlandish, but who knows? It's Formula One and all of that. But
Unlikely. Yeah, exactly. And what do you think about this, Kunal?
Uh, Similar thoughts, Russell, I don't think he's going to do another year at Williams. I think Mercedes will want to plan for his succession, Soumil, and we will see maybe him making a jump into Mercedes in place of Valtteri Bottas, and Bottas's performances sort of will give Mercedes that exit, that they would want, saying, "Dude, you were brilliant, but thank you." There you go. And I don't think Valtteri Bottas is going to stick around in Formula One either, because there might
Hmm.
not be a spot for him to go to Soumil. At least that's what I think. And younger drivers coming up through the ranks again works really well for Mercedes.
Hmm. Exactly what I was thinking. Where else does Valtteri Bottas go? Does he go back to Williams? Maybe not. There are other younger Formula 2 drivers. Maybe he could do some sports car racing. Maybe that's something that Valtteri has to decide, not us. So let's not
Or
focus too much on
rallying
that.
like he loves.
Or rallying, yes. Finnish drivers in rallying. What is it? They just know their way around it. I hope that Valtteri will be more successful than Kimi in rallying, at least, because Kimi's rallying time was just perfectly summed up by that one picture, standing on his upside down car and just looking around somewhere. What's just happening right now? That must have been somewhat of a favorite image for you, didn't it, Mithila? That was quite something.
Kimi was meant to be in Formula One. The stars aligned to bring him back.
Exactly, and thank goodness for it. A second run, just something else.
So yeah, I can't
Now,
imagine it
moving
having been
on.
any other way.
Exactly. And speaking of Kimi, there's a question from Nityanand. who's a graph and stats expert. You should check out his features on the Pits To Podium website. He asks, should Alfa Romeo pair Giovinazzi with Ilott for 2022? And he says, sorry, Kimi fans. So I think he's saying sorry to you, Mithila. But yeah, what do
Apology
you reckon?
accepted.
I'm not going to ask you because I know your take on this.
Yeah, I think Callum Islet definitely is missing out on some fun in Formula One, right? But I don't think Alfa Romeo necessarily gets to decide whether Kimi is going to race for one more season with them or not. I have a feeling he's going to race one more season under the new formula just because he's probably going to love it. He wants to experience what the difference is. But that said, Giovinazzi has been the underdog of the season. I would say he's beaten Kimi black and blue. Just that it's in an Alfa Romeo. It's a team that we don't end up speaking too much about. But I think Giovinazzi has shown that he's sort of ready to take the step as a leader in case Alfa Romeo decide to go with Callum Islet next year. And that actually would be cruel for Mick Schumacher, because Mick Schumacher would have hoped that he was in the Alfa Romeo, in a better brand, in a better team than Haas. But that's for another conversation altogether, Soumil. And like I said, younger drivers making way. Callum will probably be the youngest driver making a way for coming in for the oldest driver on the grid.
Exactly. Exactly. It'll be crazy. And the Mick point is just so relevant, right? Everyone expects him to get to Alfa Romeo next year. Who knows which way it's going to point out? One of our very consistent followers, it's XE Claire, not XE Shah. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it, but mate, thank you so much for following us over the last few weeks. Always a pleasure to know your takes on it. He asks, point table changes. Can Mercedes fight back? Lewis and Bottas have had bad races in Monaco. Mercedes never been under pressure over the years until now. Can they pull back? I think it's a bit of a common consensus here, isn't it?
I think so, and I'm pretty sure Mercedes are going to be back come Baku. And I must tell you, the Mercedes Red Bull fight has not only has expanded from being only on track to in the legal war rooms, as the teams would have it, because flexi wings is going to be a big point of discussion in the week building up to Baku, and maybe we'll see an official protest or two. And Red Bull hiring engineers from Mercedes, that's been a talking point as well. Toto Wolff and Christian Horner are taking punches at each other through press conferences. So Red Bull versus Mercedes is getting real in all forms of Formula One, and I think that's brilliant. And Mercedes have been under pressure, but not so much so has been put by Red Bull and Verstappen, because they are always up there. Unlike Ferrari, where you had 4-5 races of pressure and suddenly a bad race and you take the pressure off. So I have this feeling that, it's going to be neck and neck through the entire course of the season.
So, Mithila, I'm going to ask this to you in this way. By which race do you think Mercedes is going to win the championship?
I really, really hope that we have a season where I can, sit here, even if say that, oh my God, it's still too close to call. And Soumil, it feels like Mercedes is sweating under the collar, like we're talking about the fallout off track. It seems to be that competition is getting too close for comfort. And up till now, wherever it was seasons where comfortably ahead, they always had this very different messaging. But now, as the gap seems to be closing, you actually start seeing that they can no longer afford to be this whole team where, it's all good and all of that. And you see the whole fallout of that. It's getting real. So hopefully, really good season.
Exactly. That's what all of us are hoping for eventually. Another question from Nityanand. Should F1 teams try the Moneyball technique to select Formula One drivers? It'll be cost effective. As far as I can remember, only Force India have come close to mastering Moneyball in Formula One. Kunal, of course, he used to work in Force India. Vijay Mallya once called the team pound for pound the most cost-effective team in Formula One, or something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing. Your thoughts on this? Because he was right. Force India, for every pound invested, they did get the most value out of it. And in terms of drivers, I'm not sure how you can do that, but at least in terms of R&D investment, that's what you guys did very well.
Yes, I mean, Force India, I think bang for the buck and pounds for pound world champion, and lots of nice adjectives that came our way when I was working there, and we had those 2 seasons of being fourth in the championship. But I'll put it this way: I think, not I think, I know that teams already use a very high data driven technique when it comes to selecting drivers. Every lap is assessed against competitors, against benchmarks, lots of reference points that go in the junior formula as well. So it's not necessarily the money ball technique as we've seen it in the movie, right? But teams already know a lot about their drivers through the junior formula, through the preseason tests, and so on, so that you end up making a decision which is as closer to the correct decision as possible. And seldom do you see bad drivers make it up into Formula One these days. And when I say bad, I mean they'll be a second off and they'll crawl back the second and so on. But they're fairly up there, when it comes to making the step up into Formula One.
You mean those drivers on who come into Formula One on merit?
I would say even on merit, and even the ones who are paying for it, because I'll put it this way: the ones paying for it just get more time to get up to pace, as opposed to the ones that are not paying for it, Soumil, right? So Mazepin, after races, he's going to be like how we look at Lance Stroll these days. Everyone's suddenly saying, yeah, Lance Stroll is half decent. He's good. He's a nice driver, but he's had 50, 60 races to do that. Whereas, somebody like a Giovinazzi is probably taken 20 races as a time. He never knew if he was going to get an extension. He still doesn't know if he's going to get an extension next year, while he's still, like I said, beaten Kimi Raikkonen, in the first 5 races of the season. So, Moneyball, yes, it is something that teams already do, Soumil. And thanks, Nityanand, for that interesting question.
That was a good one. That really was a very interesting one. Lucian has come onto the chat. This is such a nice thing. Lucian was our guest member for the last Inside Line F1 podcast live stream. He said, couldn't afford me this time. I get it. All those Hamilton comments cost you. So good to see Lucian in the chat. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. We love his music, and you guys should all go listen to Lucian on Spotify and on Bandcamp. So we miss you, Lucian. Thank you for
You're
tuning in all the way
amazing.
from Australia.
Exactly. Now, final couple of questions, guys, before we wrap up. Time is a funny thing. All day speaking about Formula One, but such a shame that we have to wrap up just because, of course, attention spans. Nobody watches an hour-long episode, right? So, for final few questions, we can go through this very quickly. What if George Russell joins Mercedes, but Williams flip the coin and become a title contender in 2022? How cruel could that be? This one is from Nityanan. Your thoughts, Mithila? I don't think it'll be that dramatic, right? The changes in 2022.
One up there is scripting the worst possible story for George Russell, really like punking him in the worst way possible. And I don't quite see that happening. It sounds like something the guys at Netflix might be thinking of, for a spin off Formula One series, but very creative.
Exactly. And what do you think about this, Kunal? What if we could see something like this? What if all of a sudden Williams just master the 2022 regulations? I know it's a bit unlikely, but still. At least there's this feeling like if Braun can do it, anyone can do it, right?
Yes, that's always the outlier that everyone speaks about when it comes to new regulations, right? But I don't see the form factor flipping literally 180 degrees. Okay, I still think that the top teams will always have that much more intellect, top intellect to drive to the new regulations, and it's not going to be a flip in the switch. And I'll also put it this way: for a George Russell, the recovery that Mercedes can make in case they get it completely wrong in 2022 is more dependable than the recovery, say, the likes of a Williams would make, which we've seen has been the bottom of the grid team for the last 5-7 years themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. Good point. Good point. Let's see which way it goes. We still don't know, but it'll be interesting to see which way things pan out. Another one from
I'm going to take that one, Soumil.
Yeah, no worries.
I'm going to take that one. Since you work in sim racing, and you've seen a lot of junior drivers grow through the ranks. Do you
Uh-huh.
think Alpine, and this is Anubhav's question, do you think Alpine is going to promote a junior driver next year, and in whose place, interestingly?
So I'll answer the second question first. I don't think it's going to happen. So in whose case doesn't become a question at all because they're locked in quite well. Fernando's not going to be here. At least, no, I mean to say, Fernando is going to be here at least till the end of next season until he gets an idea of what Alpine are like. And Alpine are going to be good next year, which is what I feel. So I don't think there's any reason for anyone else to come in, right? So, and Ocon has been especially good too. I think next year is when we'll be finding out whether he's genuinely that good or is it just that Fernando is struggling to adapt to Alpine in his first year. And after that happens, when we come to 2023, that will be, I think, Guan Yu Zhou, I think if he wins F2 this year, it'll be far too long later for him to go. Well, I mean, what does Guan Yu Zhou do for 1 year, right? Does he go to Super Formula? That's somewhat of a demotion. Does he sits back like Callum Ilott? I think it could be relevant if you sit back. People can forget you. And Callum Ilott, even at this stage, we're only barely speaking about him. So I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen. The Alpine Academy, dare I say this, it's been a promising project with a few millions of dollars being invested into it, but it's not led to something eventually. And same for Mercedes. They have to learn from Ferrari in the way that they've done it.
Yeah, absolutely, Soumil. And Sayyid Afif has said that talking about bad drivers, I can see Haas becoming an Ural Kali team with Mazepin and Deleda driving for them in 2024. Now, if that happens, we're going to change the name of our channel, Soumil. Do I have a word on that?
I think we need all three of us to take on that. I am fine. What are your thoughts, Mithila?
We wait and watch.
No, so we have to decide what name it will be. Oh, the
We'll call it the Ural Kali F1 podcast. We can just go with that
oh,
if that ever happens.
or the Spin Sideline F1 podcast? No, or something.
Well said.
Oh boy.
Yeah, the only thing I say is fingers crossed. Hopefully not. Again, if Ural Kali sees marketing value, if Haas needs a seller or buyer, that is, I mean to say, why not? It could very well happen, right? If Lawrence Stroll can get it, so can Ural Kali. So you never know which way things are going to go out. Finally, we have right there from Celsiar. I think we finally got the name correct. Thoughts on the upcoming year for McLaren and Ferrari? Can we see a fight for the championship, at least for the team constructors? Both teams have consistently pulled out points in every single race. So I think he's talking about the fight for P3, isn't it? I
Yeah.
think this one is really old memories refreshed, Mithla. It's been so many years since we've seen Ferrari and McLaren properly duel it out head to head against each other. And it's just turning out to be such a wild ride, albeit for P3, but still.
It feels very nostalgic because when I first started watching Formula One in the early 2000s, that was out for. The initial seasons, it was Kimi Raikkonen and Michael Schumacher, and they were battling it out. Those were the early days of Kimi Raikkonen. And it feels really interesting and great to see a team like McLaren, especially. They've struggled so much. Struggled like crazy. And, just to be able to utter their name back in a very competitive sense, it's so heartening. It really gives a lot of hope to the future of Formula One and the future of the driver market, like we've been talking about. That a team whole kind of life cycle and still come out and fight. So kudos.
Guys, last question before we wrap up, and this is, I think I'll start with you on this one, Mitla. Do you think that Ferrari and McLaren are more likable now that they've had that big downfall than they used to be back in, say, early 2000s or late 2000s as well, for that matter?
That is such a great question, and I'm going to go with an emphatic yes. That has a downturn or downtime, a lot of vulnerability of that team is exposed, right? And a sport like Formula One, where it's so important to be the fastest, the best on multiple parameters, and be perfect, right? Inch perfect. When you have a situation like this that actually exposes worry, ability, it makes you so accessible to the average viewer. It makes you so much more relatable. Maybe not that great for the brand, because that's what Ferrari wants to show, that yes, we have problems and all of that. But it makes it so much more, it's so much more easy to connect through this whole struggle, and humbling for them on the entire journey. And for a fan, who's been a, then to see the highest of highs, that is an amazing rush as well.
Exactly. And what do you have to say about this, Kunal?
I couldn't have put it more eloquently than what Mithila said. It's nostalgic, it's beautiful. And, sometimes I get a feeling that when a team you don't like ends up being, from being, ends up being a challenger, ends up being the underdog, you sort of change your emotions towards that team. And that's what McLaren and Ferrari are probably going through. But again, like I said, my answer is never going to be as eloquent as Mithila's. So thank you for putting it so nicely. And I think this has been a fantastic hour of just talking Formula One with the.
Exactly. Yeah, it's passed on a bit too quickly. And Mithila, we need you on the show more often. This was
I'll
just
be
superb.
back, guys. It's been amazing fun, and I'll be back. I won't be out for what, 8 months again this time. So
You have to say it with the Arnold accent. That'll make it even more special.
I'll be back. I can't do it. I'll be
Oh,
back. And guys, next time, please don't put me in black on the creative. I was asking Kunal, oh my God, am I a guest on the show? Why have they put me in
This one's for
black?
Sundaram. Yes, we'll keep in mind. Interesting.
Yes, yes.
exactly.
Hopefully we can do this more often and listen to all the wonderful views that you guys bring. And yeah.
Awesome. Lovely. Lovely to have this hour on the Inside Line F1 podcast live. Folks, thank you so much for sticking around and watching with us. We've noticed that there was a constant stream of viewers watching us and sending in your questions. Guys, many thanks. It means a lot to us. And see you in the next episode. We're going to be coming up with the race previews, I think on Friday, that is, after first free practice. So watch out for that, along with the regular race reviews and more special stuff coming up on the Pits To Podium social media channels. All that right there. And folks, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. See you next time.
Thanks, Soumil. See you guys.
Thank you so much.